Amos isn't afraid of monsters, she said. The words tasted bitter, but not completely so. Or no, not bitter, complex though. She is responsible for a lot of dead people, Jim said. She blew up the Sung-un, took out a quarter of the crew, and that one body they found, the one she was carrying around in a toolbox, do you remember that? I do. That guy was a friend of hers. She wasn't just killing faceless enemies. She was right down, look them in the eyes, killing people that she knew, that she liked. How do you go from that to, I know, let's ship with her? She knew she should stop him. He wasn't talking about her or the Augustin Gomorrah or any of the other ships that had been sabotaged since using the code she wrote. He wasn't talking about Sin or the way he'd tried to intervene in her half-stage suicide. If he had been, there would have been more. How could she abandon her son? How could she let Philip think that she'd killed herself? How could she have kept something that important hidden from the people she said she cared about? All the sins she carried that even Clarissa Mal didn't. Hey guys, Pete here. Now that we've had some time to reflect on Season 5, it's time to look at the biggest questions we have heading into Season 6. As for spoilers, there will be a lot if you haven't watched all the available episodes of The Expanse through Season 5. I'll be referring to the books the series is based on, but nothing past the 5th one, Nemesis Games, so there won't be any future spoilers there. With that out of the way, let's talk about Season 6. One of the questions I've seen the most is who will be the new pilot on the Roci now that Alex is dead? I'll circle back and talk about his death and how that affects the story a little more at the end of the video. But as far as his replacement, I think it will probably be Bull. Mainly because I don't know why they would add the scene of him sitting in the captain's chair, holding Alex's mug otherwise. The shot serves no purpose other than to hint that he's the new pilot for the Roci. The other two named characters who've been candidates for the role were Bobbie and Clarissa. Bobbie has done some piloting. The ship sort of needs a Martian on it now, and she's definitely a popular character. However, the thing with her being the pilot is it takes away any chances of her being a Marine. If she's flying it, she can't defend the ship. And she can't do any of the other things that Bobbie is good at either. Think about the things Alex did. He sat and he waited for the crew to come back so he could fly them away. Clarissa has some piloting in her background too, but I think she makes even less sense overall. Don't get me wrong, I see why people like this idea. I see it a lot in the comments. And I guess she has the most potential to develop into the same role that Alex played in the crew dynamic. But even though she's bonded with Amos, and the crew definitely trust him, I can't imagine that they trust her yet. She did try to kill Holden. She did try to kill them. She had a turn. She made up for it in some ways. But in Season 5, we had this whole thing where everybody realized this is their family, this is their home. Would it make sense that they would hand over such a crucial role to Clarissa? As far as Bull's concerned, I didn't like the idea of him being pilot at first, mainly because he's not the same type of character as Alex. With more thought though, all that really means is that things will be different within the crew, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The authors of the books are writers on the show, and I tend to believe that they're capable of incorporating this change of personnel in a satisfying way. The next question then is, will Bobbie and Clarissa join the crew? What about Monica? It seemed like she was trying to keep herself close to the action in the finale. I think it's safe to say that with Bobbie being announced as Avasarala's liaison, that she'll play a large role in the 6th season. And considering that it seems like everything's set up for there to be a war between the Inners and the Free Navy, you would imagine that she might find herself on the Roci. As far as Clarissa, she doesn't really have anywhere else to go. In the books during their journey, Amos and Clarissa make a pact that if she has to go back to Earth, has to go back to prison to serve her sentence, he'll actually kill her. She'd rather die than go back. And I doubt that the show would change that even though it wasn't explicitly stated. In other words, it looks like she would probably be on the ship throughout Season 6. Monica is a question mark. They upped her role somewhat in Season 5. I think most people I've talked to seem to like that. They thought it was a good idea to have her there with Holden, at least while Naomi's gone. So we'll have to wait and see. I think she will be involved with the story for sure, but I don't know if that'll involve being a passenger on the Rocinante or not. The next thing that I got a lot of questions about was, will the breakaway Martian fleet play a big role in the final season? This is an area where show watchers and book readers are wondering the same thing for different reasons. Show people are wondering what their plan is, and book readers already know that, so they're wondering if this changes things. And I lean towards no. The Laconians gave us an idea of their vision, and that's not something that can happen overnight. For those who are wondering what happened to the Barkeith, I do think we'll learn a lot more about that in Season 6, even if it's unrelated to Laconia. If you're wondering why they were introduced at the end of Season 5 if they're not going to play a big role, well, they had to be. The end of Season 5 was almost a direct adaptation of the epilogue of the 5th book, and it has to be there because there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't make sense otherwise, such as how did Marco get his fleet in the first place? Why did he want to control the ring network? Why did he want to steal the protomolecule, and so on? All of Marco's actions were coordinated with these people, and so we did have to meet them, but now that he controls Medina Station and the ring space, that actually puts them completely out of the inner planet's reach. Sauveterre himself actually outlined this in the 2nd episode when he was talking about how the ring space was an asymmetrical choke point. Right now, that part of the Martian fleet that made it through Laconia Gate aren't the first order of business. And speaking of Earth and Mars, how bad are things? They haven't made it clear how many people were involved in this Martian breakaway fleet. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens at the beginning of next season for that. As far as Earth is concerned, one of the big questions that people have been asking is how bad is it? How much damage did the asteroid attacks have? This has been an ongoing question for book readers because it seemed like the show downplayed it a bit. Beyond what we saw throughout the season, the most detailed description I've seen comes from a post-finale interview with one of the series co-creators, Ty Frank. The question was framed as, are all the major cities in the world in as bad a shape as Baltimore is? He answered, no, they're not. There have only been 3 asteroid strikes. The cities that are devastated the same way. Baltimore is one of the ones that are close to the strikes, but there is still widespread problems in other cities, even the ones that weren't directly hit. Problems with access to food, access to power. So there's a breakdown in the social structures and the civil structures, but not all the cities have physically collapsed. So to me, that sounds like we can expect that there will be major problems on the planet, but it's still not really clear how devastating it'll be. So I already kind of mentioned why Marco wanted to control the ring gates in the first place. This was part of the Martian plan. But another question I got was more specific towards Belters, in that why would he want to control the transit when Belters can't live on the planets anyways? And there's a couple options here. He could just shut it down, not let anybody travel anywhere. That would keep the status quo, at least as far as resource extraction inside the system. If the Free Navy were running things, you would have to think that Belters would get a better deal. The other option is what Fred Johnson wanted to do in the first place. It was control Medina Station so that he had a part in what happened in the system and therefore was too powerful to displace or just ignore. It was a good idea. Marco could pick that up, and he actually has a navy to go along with Medina, so he would be in a lot more powerful of a situation. Another question out there, and one I'm really interested in myself, is what's going to happen with Drummer? The last time we saw her, her family split apart. It was just her on the Tynan with Joseph and Michio. There's not a lot of good options for her in this situation. There's an outside chance that Oksana could make a plea towards Marco, saying that she didn't have anything to do with the betrayal, which is true, but you would think that Marco would definitely go after Drummer. And even if he doesn't, his influence will be felt almost anywhere she goes. She wouldn't be able to interact with any Belter ships because she wouldn't know if they were sympathetic to the Free Navy. And what's more, just as he took over Medina Station, strategically, he should work to try to take over the other stations. So there's really no safe place for her to go. Even after Palace's attack, it still wouldn't make sense that all Belters followed Marco blindly. With Fred gone at Tycho, there is the possibility that Drummer might step into that void, take over his role, or if not that, you think she would have to reach out to the Rocinante, to Holden and to Naomi, because there's really nowhere else for her to go. So I'm curious to see where they go with it. So I did get a lot of questions about Alex, about what his death means for the rest of the story. A lot of questions about whether he died in the book, if he died in the book in the same way. What are we going to miss out on if he's not there? As far as the decision to kill him off, I look at that as they didn't really have a better option. If you look into it at all, and there is a really comprehensive thread on the subreddit, which I'll put a link to in the comments if you haven't seen it. If you look into everything that's out there, there was really no scenario where this actor came back to play this character again. So did Alex die in the book? No, he didn't. So he didn't die in the same way. The character that did die this way from a high G maneuver was Fred Johnson, but that didn't happen until book 6. They decided to kill Fred off early in the season because according to the writers, they wanted there to be some stakes involved because a lot of crazy stuff happens and nobody really dies in the narrative. And I tend to agree with this to a certain extent because the first time I read the books, I read straight through 1 through 6. Those were already out by the time that I started reading it. And they're page turners, so I just read through them all and was basically in binge mode. And it was around this time in book 5 where I started to think, this is a fun story, I like everything about it, but there aren't really any stakes because I never feel like any of the main characters could die. So to me, it looks like they killed Fred early, and that left the original way he died out there. They found out about the allegations about Cas Anvar. The studio did an investigation that lasted a couple months, and they decided to fire him after season 5 was already shot. So they had to do something. And in my opinion, this is the best thing that you could come up with. I was never a big fan of recasting because original Alex already had such a good chemistry. You had 5 seasons of it. So I think it's better that you just don't even try to recreate that. You just go a different way. You have the original writers involved, let them come up with something. Don't try to give us a watered down version of something that already worked. As far as the character is concerned, I think this is a fitting death with him. Now that doesn't mean that I think it came off flawlessly. Like I said, it feels pretty obvious that this wasn't the original ending of the season. Like I always do when I finish watching an episode on Amazon Prime, I went straight into the bonus content. And right after the show aired, he was in all the photos on Luna. They hadn't edited him out like they did in the episode. And so, yeah, that sucks. It would have been nice if none of this had happened. Like we could just have things the way they were originally intended, but that's just not the case. And so I think that giving Alex a hero's ending that fits with what the character would want, Amos laid this out perfectly in the finale. That's really just the best you could hope for. As far as what we might miss without Alex, the only significant thing he did in book 6, other than just being the pilot, was he got into a side romance. So personally, I won't miss that all that much. And he did have some great moments in later books, but we don't even know if we're going to get to see those stories yet or not. So what are you going to do? If you thought that killing off a major character in a high G burn was less than thrilling, I kind of understand. When I first read Fred's death, it took a while to set in based on how it happened. I was like, Fred is really dead? He just died in the chair during the battle? Why didn't anyone notice any of that, you know? But with time, it grew on me because it underlines the fact that it could happen to anyone at any time. It's the same thing. They say high G maneuvers are dangerous, yet no one ever gets hurt or suffers the consequences. After a while, it starts to feel like there aren't any stakes. And I think that's a good place to leave it. Let me know in the comments what questions you have about season 6. I'll try to answer what I can. I don't usually do live streams, but I was thinking maybe about doing one, discuss and answer some questions about seasons 5 and 6, and bring on a couple other YouTubers. So let me know what you think about that idea. Also, I have heard the request about the Laconia book spoilers, so I've been working on that. I'm trying to put together something that gives backstory and details without ruining the future plot points, because you really should read the books and experience those as they were intended for yourself. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.